In our first lesson, we will arrange a simple chorale phrase for strings, for woodwinds, and then for brass. Often, such simple homophonic textures act as background for a leading line, but they also sometimes occur by themselves. This situation comes up often, and it's a basic orchestral technique. In these textures, the key thing we're looking for is blend. They must sound like coherent wholes, not like a collection of contrasting soloists. Especially as background, poorly blended sound attracts too much attention, distracting from the main line. Dynamics have an enormous influence in orchestration decisions. That's why this lesson will propose only quiet solutions. In our next lesson, we'll examine loud versions for the same three families. Let's start with a chorale phrase from Bach. Here's the vocal version. As we can see, the main lines are the soprano and the bass. The tenor has some melodic interest as well, but the alto, at least in this phrase, is just harmonic filler. Here's a version for strings. Strings have the advantage that they're already well blended, so a little transcription works quite well. Notice, by the way, that we have to add bowing indications. Doing the whole phrase détaché would be a bit heavy. We could add the double basses an octave below the cello. Result is a bit deeper, but no less successful. If we wanted a quieter sound, we could also do a divisi version. Notice how the divisi sound is thinner in addition to being quieter, since each part is being played by about half the regular number of players. Now let's look at some woodwind versions. Here is what most students bring in as a first try. There are problems here. First of all, the oboe sticks out too much. Low oboe is naturally a somewhat honky sound that doesn't blend very well with the other instruments. And to make it worse, the alto line is the least interesting of all in the original. Finally, the flute sounds pale by comparison. Here's another version. This is better, at least the oboe is the main melody. It doesn't blend that well with the other instruments, but at least the part that stands out is musically the most important one. However, if this were background for something else, the oboe could be annoying. Oboes are prima donnas. They don't easily disappear into the mass. Here's a much better blended version. 3 clarinets and a bass clarinet. Since all the instruments are in the same family, blend is easy. We could also do this. Clarinets and bassoons blend quite well together, as long as the bassoon isn't in its lowest register. Here's another possibility. Notice how doubling the outer lines at the octave makes the whole sound a bit louder, even if the written dynamic is still piano. This is a general rule. Octave doubling always adds more force than unison doubling, since it reinforces the harmonics above the fundamental. Now let's look at the brass. Here's the first try. Although this is not as heterogeneous as our first woodwind effort, there is an audible difference between the more focused sound of the trumpet and the trombone and the rounder sound of the horn and the tuba. This is an important distinction. Loudness and roundness are not the same. The tuba can play just as loud as the trombone, but the sound will always be fatter. Okay, let's try a version with only trumpets and trombones. Here the sound is indeed more blended since all the instruments are of the same type. If we want to include the horns, here's a better version than the one above. Notice that the horns here do not just double the original chorale parts. Rather, they form a blended mass in the alto-tenor range. The fourth horn doubles the first horn an octave lower, and horns 2 and 3 fill in the middle parts. So now we have two masses, one made up of trumpets and trombones, and another consisting of horns in the middle. This is the classic recipe for full brass with a generous blended sound. We could also enlarge this with the tuba, but now the tuba doesn't stand out so much since it's doubling the bass trombone an octave lower, not playing the bass by itself. Also, the horn mass in the middle makes the whole richer. To sum up, when you need a blended mass of harmony, each family has its own characteristics that must be respected. In the next lesson, we'll redo the same exercise but loud, and that changes everything.